Welcome to the CE Pro podcast. I'm Executive Editor Arlen Schweiger. COVID-19 has put an emphasis on solid home networks like never before. The surge in home offices, homeschooling, and enjoying home entertainment via streaming AV has been remarkable. Yet poor networks still abound. Why is that? Well, three industry experts joined CE Pro's Jason Knott to discuss the situation, as well as the ramifications of these crummy networks on voice control, service revenues, and other key elements of the custom electronics industry.
Hi, Jason Knott with CE Pro, and I'm excited to be joined today by three experts in the industry for a fascinating discussion that we're going to have about the state of home networking and the growing desire for various types of interfaces, namely voice interface for the smart home today. You know, we know right now with coronavirus, there's never a better time to be talking about the value of a home network. And we know that the trends are on the upward side for voice control. Yet in the field, we're still hearing anecdotally about so many integrators out there who are not taking their network seriously. So we're going to talk about that today. With me today are Josh Rich, who is president of Rich AV Design in Stamford, Connecticut. Hi, Josh.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining me today. Also with me, Alex Caposalatro, CEO of josh.ai. Hi, Josh. Oh, hi, Josh. Hi, Alex. I knew I was going to do that.
Funny anecdote, when Josh Rich had first reached out about becoming a Josh dealer, I kept getting confused about, like, is this an internal thing? Like, who's, like, instead of calling a person Josh, I was calling the person the company.
Yeah. Thank God that our last guest is not named Josh. Hagai Feiner, founder and CEO of Access Networks. Hi, Hagai.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me.
All right, Hagai, let me start with you. You know, I kind of said it in the preface there, but right now with COVID-19, there is really the best opportunity for integrators to be talking about network upgrades with their clients, correct? Why is that?
I agree. I think historically, the networking conversation has been a difficult one, simply because the network doesn't really appeal to any of the senses, meaning it doesn't sound good, it doesn't look good. There's really nothing sensual that it brings to the homeowner. But what COVID did for all of us as a service is create a situation where the homeowner is forced to deal with living in this home 24/7, where all the family members are there. Everybody has whatever it is that they demand from the network. And I think between schooling and the need to be able to work, the Zoom conferences, just like what we're doing now, have created a load on the network that maybe until that point wasn't there, and forced the homeowner to come to, you know, their own conclusions about what they have, what they need, where they spend their budget, right? What does this budget go to when it comes to spending money in the home? And it's become a priority. So if it used to be a push and maybe an argument for the integrator, hey, we need to do a better network, to install a better network with a whole set of parts, and here's how it's going to be configured. Homeowners traditionally don't want to have those conversations, but now they're the ones coming to the integrator saying, I need an upgrade. We're leaving from the city to another house that we have. Make sure that it's ready for us. We've seen all over the board in the last 3 months a whole host of upgrades to existing systems, to systems that we've, let's say, never installed before, and they get replaced with newer gear now. And this opportunity is probably here to stay. But now, as the economy is reopening and people are allowing integrators back into their homes, great opportunity for us to get back in there and refresh that network.
So, Alex, we know that the home network's vital from the home office standpoint. We know it's vital for streaming media. How vital is the solid network for voice control to work properly and most effectively?
I mean, it's critical. And I think what people often forget about when it comes to voice control, and in particular when it comes to Josh, the voice control element is basically a control system. So it needs to be talking over the network to your streaming music, your streaming video, your lights, your shades, your thermostats. In order for voice control to work, all of that needs to be true. And if your network is not strong, if you have devices that are dropping off the network or having problems, it's going to really interfere with voice control. And even if everything is set up well, but you just have a really slow connection, or maybe your access points are too far away, you have to go out to the cloud for any voice control system today. So that, will interfere with how quickly do you get a response. Does a response get dropped at all, which certainly can happen. And to me, it's just such an obvious thing. And one of the reasons I was excited about this panel is it's so obvious to me, it's so obvious to a guy, it's probably very obvious to Josh Rich, but we now work with over 500 dealers at Josh who are certified, and we still see this problem happening far too often. So it's either that it's not obvious to dealers, or it is obvious, but the clients push back and they're not drawing the line saying, look, if you don't want to upgrade your network, no problem, but no voice control for you. We need the soup Nazi in there if they're not willing to upgrade their network.
All right, well, let's turn to the soup Nazi on the panel, Josh Rich. Josh, first tell us a little bit about Rich AV Design, and then also tell us how important it is for you to build robust home networks for your clients.
Yeah, so I'm a custom integrator. I started the company in 2001, about 19 years ago. And we grew from just me to now we have 7 employees, and we specialize in the high-end residential control and automation space. Like Alex and Hagai said, so many of the things in our daily life are network-based. Phones, music players, voice control, and the list goes on. Having a solid wired and wireless network is the foundation to a fast and trouble-free smart home. So in the scope of the whole job, the network is a single point of failure. If you put in something that's not reliable, you're playing roulette with the service end of your business, and you're just waiting to get that call on Thanksgiving, like your customer is having family over and they're stressing the system more than normal and things are not working properly, which means you now need to fix it fast. The customer might feel like this is your fault and they're embarrassed. So what we do to avoid these situations is putting in enterprise grade networks.
So to Hagai's point, when we opened up about now being the best time in this era of COVID-19, have you seen it place a greater emphasis on the network for yourself and your customers? Josh?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to Hagai.
No.
Yeah. So for many years, the technology in a person's home was considered recreational, for lack of a better word. It was important that it worked, but maybe they didn't have the fastest internet available, or maybe that outdoor access point, was something that got taken out of the original scope. That's all changed now. Not only do we have 1 or 2 parents working from home, but their kids are also going to school at home. The network became, for so many, something that was once for email and Netflix to now hosting multiple video conferences, Wi-Fi calling at the same time. So now more than ever, having like a solid network is really important.
So Alex, let me go back to something you mentioned about how you still see this pervasiveness in the field with poor networks. Let's talk a little bit about that. Why do you think that is happening? Is it because, as Hagai said, it's this invisible thing that's not visual, it's not tangible, people can't touch the network, and so the homeowner doesn't see the value there, but it doesn't really make sense for an integrator not to see that value. What do you think?
I think Hagai really nailed it. When you're providing a bid to a client and everything starts adding up and they're kind of getting glossy-eyed saying, this is twice the budget I was thinking about, cuts have to start happening. And they're saying, I don't want to make cuts on my sound system. I want to have great music, and I don't want to make cuts on my lighting system. That's what I need to, see. But on the network, it can feel from the customer's perspective like, oh, that's the easiest thing to cut out or to downgrade or to modify. And I've come to learn that there's a really tricky dance the dealer has to play with the customer, where you don't want to feel like you're pushing too hard. You don't want to feel like you're overselling. But at the same time, there needs to be a point where you put your foot down and say, look, if you're not willing to meet the minimum requirements, I'm not going to work on your home because it's going to be a support nightmare. And I just think a lot of dealers are not willing to do that. They basically say, all right, if 100K is not going to work, but you're willing to pay 50 and the speakers are going to cost 25 and lighting, we'll put in an Eero network or something that's, maybe not going to be sufficient for a large home or a complicated home. And the dealer's just happy to close the sale. They're happy that they got the business, but not necessarily thinking about, ooh, this is going to be a nightmare. I'm going to get that call on Thanksgiving morning. And it's the call no dealer wants, but you don't want to lose the sale. And so I think that's a problem that isn't necessarily addressed, but we as an industry can certainly do a better job at figuring out how to tell this story about why the network is so important.
Now, doesn't Josh AI have a little bit of a less reliance on that network or the cloud, I should say, than maybe some of the other voice control systems out there? Is that advantageous? But even with that capability, it still requires the robust network.
Correct. I think a great way to think about it is you could have a wireless device, a Wi-Fi device, or you could power with PoE. Many devices will work in both instances, but we know that the PoE device is going to be more reliable and more stable. It's the same thing with Josh. Yes, the dependency on the network is less, but having a weaker network just increases the chances that something doesn't work. And you know it's going to be that time when you've got your boss over for dinner, or your investor, or your girlfriend, or whoever it happens to be, and you're wanting to really make sure things work. And if that's when you have a network problem, it's not good. So yes, you're right in that the network dependency is less for Josh relative to others, but that still doesn't mean, we'd recommend sacrificing on it.
Guy, could you talk a little bit about what Access Networks brings to the table in terms of kind of this, all wrapped up in a bow solution for the integrator? So it's not this monumental task to try and bring a high, robust network to the clientele?
Sure. And I think that for us, you can go and get the gear anywhere, right? So all the hardware we use is generally available in the marketplace. And you can, as an integrator, you can try and figure this out on your own. And what I've learned over time is that there is more about networking that I don't know than the stuff that I do know. And the only way for me, even at Access, to grow the business is to bring in people who are smarter than me, who know networking at a depth that I don't. And together we've created a team of 40 people that are completely laser focused on taking enterprise grade gear and putting it in the home. And so what that creates is a system that we have, from design into engineering, programming, commissioning, that is aiming at delivering the project to the expectation of the integrator and the homeowner. And so I know that there is a knowledge gap in the industry, and it's been like this for a long time. And as far as you would try to educate yourself as an integrator, there's always going to be something that you don't know, in the same way that I don't know it to that depth. And that is exactly why we've created a team of people here at Access that will help you create that system. You don't have to know the details of, all the little pieces of code that we put in there to make stuff work, but we understand latency, and we know that we want low latency across all the jobs that we deploy, and we know troubleshooting, and we understand how Crestron NVX works, for example. And so even, for Ruckus, we represent almost like a buffer, if you will, when it comes to programming, commissioning, support, where if you call Ruckus and say, I have an NVX problem, they're gonna just not really know what you're talking about. In the same way, if you had a problem with Josh AI, and usually it's not Josh, it's really the network that is the problem. This is why we exist. It's the gap in the market that we fill with specific industry knowledge, both on the AV and integration side and the networking side, that helps any integrator, really anyone, take a network that we build and go deploy it in a matter of hours, usually. And by the way, this is not rare just to integrators. Our CFO, for the longest time, didn't want a network from Access Networks to be installed at her house. Well, COVID hits, her calls dropped. She's up in the hills here in Beverly Hills. She lives there with her husband, and she's unable to work, unable to communicate because there's no cell service. So even Wi-Fi calling is just jittery. And to a point where I said, hey, you know what? This is not a request. This is an order. You have to take a network from us, and we'll design it for you. We'll program it for you and ship it over. And her integrator, who's been troubleshooting her home network for weeks, without being able to make progress nor billing, right? Because she's frustrated. He can't bill her because it's a network he installed and it's supposed to work. And lo and behold, replace the network with our system and she's communicating. Her Zoom calls are not dropping anymore. We can actually understand what she's saying. And this is a critical element of our business. This is common across the board. This is not just an external issue to the clients that we hear about here and there. This is even, happens to us.
Believe me, it happens to us too on this end. So let's get kind of an in the field perspective again. Josh, at Rich AV Design, tell us a little bit, let's dig into the details. What does your basic network consist of, and how are you being augmented by access networks?
Okay, so the most basic network that we'll put in is a dedicated router, not the router that the cable company will likely give you. Access points, one per every 1,100 square feet or so. PoE network switch. And we also include a Blue Bolt on every job that will automatically reboot the network if it sees that there's no internet. That's like the most basic, and we grow from there. We use access networks for many of our jobs, and that's augmented really in a way I can't put into words. I mean, using access networks is the only reason that we can have this bottom line of not having techs that are CCNAs and other, really in-depth, programmers. With access networks, like, they literally provide you with a pre-programmed system and a schematic on how to properly plug it in. Assuming that your employees can follow a drawing and properly plug everything in, you're 90% done in a very short amount of time. After that, we call them to review, which is something that they do on the spot. They check for interference issues. They would get any wiring issues at that point. And once you've done that, which is usually not more than an hour or so, you're done.
So going back to what Alex and I were talking about, it's about so many integrators out there that are still cutting corners. Your peers out there, you obviously get it. Do you care if there are other integrators who aren't doing it? Because that puts even more value on what you bring to the table, or does that besmirch what you do as overall? And maybe that is a call that you don't even get to upgrade the network because they're like, screw this, I don't want to deal with integrators. They don't know how to handle my network. What do you think's going on out there?
Do I care that what other integrators are doing? And if they cut corners?
Yeah.
We get a lot of business, honestly, from customers that have gone with integrators that have made mistakes or not done the right thing by them. Education is a lot of why that happens, I think. When integrators cut corners, I feel like it's for a few reasons. Either maybe it's a new company and they haven't been burned by all the costs that you incur when you sell a customer an A experience, but then they actually get a C or D experience and it's on your dime to fix it. Or possibly they haven't used a quality network before and they don't see the difference or know what the difference is. Maybe they don't understand the difference. If you asked an integrator that cut corners why they do it and they said it was because they make more money, I could spend hours arguing why they're not making more money by doing that.
How do you demo it? We talked about this invisible element of the network. How do you demo it? Is there some foolproof way to really show the customer when you walk in the difference between having a good network and a crummy one that comes from the cable company?
There's not in the sales phase. This is where trust comes in. And this is just the beginning of the trust relationship between you and your customer, which is a whole nother, panel. But it's trust and education, which is really where you're showing them why it's going to make a difference in advance. And
just to kind of put a nail on that final point I was talking to Alex about, have you seen differences in the performance of the network for voice control when you have a poor network versus a solid, robust one?
Yeah, so it really doesn't matter as much if it's voice control or some other device. Anything like that is essentially a subsystem of the network. And if you don't have a strong network, you can't expect any of these other subsystems to perform properly.
So I actually have a comment about that. What happens now with Josh AI and voice control is something that I see as the advancement of technology, right? So to me, being able to control something with your voice is probably the holy grail of control. Maybe it's not viewed as such yet by all, but the way I see it is I'd rather have less buttons and I'd rather not mess around with a touch panel. I'd rather just say what I want to say and have the system do it. And I've seen it work at the Josh AI office, at Alex's home. It's phenomenal. It's really, to see that happen is magic. But what this application creates, and I think, think about this from a 10,000 foot view. When I started in this industry in 2002, all the client needed was internet access. Did it really matter? Latency and throughput and all that stuff? It was basic internet. There was no video online either. None of those applications existed. Fast forward to today, we're streaming, we're working at home, we're studying at home, and we're going into voice. And if you're an integrator thinking that you can pull off voice controls without a strong network, then you're dead wrong. And here's why. It's not about throughput. It's not about how much speed you have. It's about latency. It's about delay. If we don't build networks, and it doesn't matter, forget access, for example, talk about the channel. As a channel, if we don't build networks that have low latency, the client's going to speak a command, and then they're going to wait and wait and wait until something happens. And if they have to wait too long, at some point their brain's going to say, okay, this is a service call. And we don't have a way around that, but to install a solid network. And again, to me, what Josh AI represents is the wave of the future. It's stuff that we haven't done before that I think will become the new standard. Just like shading, it wasn't something we did, and now we do it. Lighting, I'm building a house in Santa Monica. Guess what? The integrator walked in and took over the lighting job in a 10-minute conversation. And the electrician stepped back. Those budgets are being reappropriated, and the integrator is now taking a bigger chunk of the job because they can. Voice is going to become one of those categories.
Just to jump in quick.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so a couple kind of quick points. I think Hagai brings up a really good point just to remember. We're installing products that are going to live in someone's home for 5, 10, 15 years or longer. We don't know what's going to exist, 10 years out, but moving, as far along that path of robustness on networks and latency, and, as we move into 5G and all this stuff, that will make our projects at least a little more future-proofed. I know we hate that term, but at least helps us think about where things are going, because we're not going to watch lower quality video. We're not going to, watch less video. We're not going to use less voice control. It'll be the opposite. And so we're going to have higher demand, and that's fairly certain. I also want to quickly point out, it's not just about the pipe coming into the home. The internal network can be misconfigured in so many different ways. And I think people often forget about the fact that by having not just the right gear, but installing it the right way, there's a lot of internal communication that has to happen, that no matter if your voice control is online or offline, there still needs to be an intranet. And so this gets into problems where if you have your device running on Wi-Fi, but your access points are facing the wrong direction, you could have problems, you can have interference. We've seen all sorts of things with VLANs come up. It really kind of spirals. And having someone like Access Networks in your corner, they really help guarantee that you're running, the best practices, your network's easy to diagnose. And if you do have a problem, what I love about these guys, just give them a call and they can remote in and see what's going on. It's really great. I do want to ask Hagai though, now that we're talking a little bit about the future and where we see the industry going, one of the things that we anecdotally hear as pushback is a great network is a substantial investment. And some projects just, if their entire budget is a smaller project, a $10,000 to $15,000 project, the network could double that. I'm curious, Hagai, where do you see your side of the business going? And do you see the cost coming down in the near term, or not necessarily?
So lots of things on the table. That's a good question. To a certain degree, cost always comes down with new generations of product. What we've seen over the years is that it actually kind of stayed the same, although the next generation of switches now from Ruckus, which we are branding as Access Networks, has reduced the cost of what we do substantially. What we're contemplating, and this idea has been in the air for a while, is AV as a service, allowing homeowners to lease the equipment if they wanted to. If there is a specific requirement, we always have integrators saying, hey, it's just not in the budget. Can we do something else? And there will always be some way we can make it more efficient. But generally speaking, the hardware is going to be a little more expensive on the enterprise side. Although if you look at straight up parts, again, part against part, what we sell, what Snap sells, it's about the same price at this point. So for, let's say, a 48 port PoE switch, a managed system costs you a little more, but it comes with, the backbone of our engineering team is 14 people now. And so there is knowledge level there all the way to CCIE. How much do you pay for that salary? If all that energy and knowledge is baked into the smallest network you can buy, to me, it's priceless. Like not having headaches, not having to go back in the age of COVID and installing it once and installing it right. It's what clients want, even if they don't realize it in the moment they're flipping through that estimate.
Staying on that crystal ball scenario, what do you say to the people out there who say, the network's going to be replaced by 5G cellular?
Well, so 5G, and you hit it on the head, cellular. Does a homeowner want all of their devices on 5G? What's going to be compatible with 5G? There's always going to be the top one of the 1% that will choose to have 5G as their LTE, private LTE network, which is doable. And then from there, from the head end, you can go out to the world. Let's say I can see that application happening, let's say on Long Island, where they have historically bad cell because they won't allow more cell towers to be installed. That could happen. But Wi-Fi is going to be around. It's going to be around for a long time. It's going to support Wi-Fi 6, actually has a lot of improvements for IoT devices that go to sleep and wake up to make them more efficient and help them preserve battery, lower latency, which is again what we talked about. So I think josh.ai and Wi-Fi 6 are going to be very good friends because of the lower latency capabilities of Wi-Fi 6. But you're always going to need a private network because you're always going to want stuff to be behind a firewall, and that's privately yours, and you're installing it with the intent of it remaining that way, remaining private. So all those devices are not just going to be going to the internet, especially, what's happening in the world. People get hacked. I think it's going to be a compatibility issue and a security issue. So the way we're going to address it is continuing on the path of Wi-Fi.
Josh, let me come back to you. We were talking about some of the business management elements of this and remoting in and service. Tell us a little bit about how you utilize the remote management structure, and do you have service agreements in place for your customers? What do you do there?
Yeah, so we partner with One Vision Resources for our support. That allows us to leverage, another much larger company than ours to provide things like 24/7 support. And we have 3 service plans that we offer, 3 paid plans. And depending on which plan you're on, depends on how much, if any, remote support you get. And if it's justified, we do charge for remote support if we have to log in and do something, fix something remotely. In terms of network management, we use a combination of Blue Bolts, Ahiji, which is soon to be Oversee, Ruckus Zone Directors, or on Leech system, if possible. With our access network systems, they have a live monitor, which gives them visibility into what we're doing. And then our primary control system is Savant. So hopefully we would have a pro host or maybe a camera server or something else so we could have an actual computer on site. And depending on the job, those are the things that we leverage for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think having the network as a kind of that base element of your remote service plans is, that's the towing in the AAA card, the AAA service. Everybody always wants to look for that slam dunk service that you can put in the service agreement. It's the network. So, all right, let me go down the line. One last comment from everybody. What would be the takeaway for an integrator? And I'll start with you, Hagai, on what they should be focusing on right now for boosting their networking business.
So I think one thing that a lot of integrators don't like to do is going back to your old clients and seeing how they're doing and seeing if there is anything that they need in their home with everything that's going on. And so that's an easy way to go into an upgrade path. We have a trade-in program, so you can trade in anyone's gear for a credit. We want those homeowners on current technology. And I think that conversation can open up a whole host of conversations, which is maybe why they're not going back there, about upgrades and changes and modifications. But this is, the reality we live in is one that requires us to go back to existing clients and talk to them about what they have. We have networks out there that are over 10 years old, and the integrators are saying, hey, I don't want to have that conversation. They're happy, and therefore I'm not going to go back. But I think it's a huge revenue stream that we're not necessarily tapping into systematically as an industry. And so that would be an easy one for me.
That's a good message. Josh, how about you? What's a good message out there for integrators right now that they should be focused on doing?
I would say, like, if you're an integrator that has no experience with enterprise level gear or anything like that, I would say educate yourself. Go talk to your rep, maybe talk to a fellow integrator and see what they think. You'll really be surprised at how much money you'll save on labor and service calls by putting your best foot forward with a good network.
All right. Final thoughts from you, Alex.
Yeah, there are kind of two things that are coming to mind. The first one we addressed briefly earlier, but I would have a essentially requirement list spelled out that your entire team is in agreement on, in terms of, in order to work on a project for a client, what are you demanding from a networking perspective and from a really architectural perspective? Because I think too many folks start with an ideal and then they get just hammered down to a point where they know they're putting in a subpar system. And so I would just try to figure out what is that minimum requirement that you will walk away from a project if the client is not willing to put in, a certain grade network or certain grade products. The other thing, just kind of off the topic of networking, but general advice, we're in a really interesting time. In March, there was a lot of uncertainty with COVID. A lot of places closed down. As a business, we actually saw March and April as two of our best months we've ever had. I imagine Hagai had very similar outcomes. And as a result, our dealers are out selling. They're doing quite well in most cities. Granted, there are definitely areas that are hit worse, but there are a lot of indicators suggesting that we might have a second wave coming. We might have an economic recession coming. And so my attitude is, this is the time to double down, to work hard. I know it's summer. I know people want to go on vacation, but I feel like clients are at home. They're ready to make updates. They understand the value. And I worry that if you don't really push hard right now on selling and installing and getting projects in, we might not have the same opportunity in the fall. Doctor friends are saying when it gets, into flu season, there might be a whole second wave. We might not be able to go on job sites. So I would definitely push hard right now, if you're able to.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Hagai. Thanks for joining CE Pro today.
Thank you so much
For having us.